Well, we are back and we have quite something. So I want to wait for everyone to migrate here, give everybody some time. We'll get started. So, as academic agent stated, he assembled the Doom panel. I think that might be it. And assembled them for something very interesting. There's been a really interesting development on, you guessed it, twitter.com. I can't shill Twitter enough. A lot of people say because of the purge, because of the new CEO, that it's useless at this point, but I disagree. There's plenty of content that, well, I'll just say this. I think that we're not going to be in a bad spot for very long. I think when things like this happen, I think it is something that we're going to be, how would you say? It just makes me really optimistic to see things like this unfold, because I think when we have James Lindsay sort of develop right in front of us, I think it's going to be really easy to see centrism. It's going to be really easy to really, I don't know, revel in the content that we're sort of seeing here. I'm going to check. One sec. Might get an echo here. So, of course, again, I'm not, I'm just trying to make some fast friends. Just want to spectate from the sidelines and see what everyone's doing here, because, I've sort of stumbled into this world. It's a little surreal, but I'm sure a lot of you who are watching right now or will watch checked out this video by academic agent, The Intellectual Poverty of James Lindsay. And for those of you that don't know who James Lindsay is, don't worry. This video pretty much summarizes his career, and we're going to talk about predictions later on, because a common theme here on the show is talking about William F. Buckley, talking about gatekeeping, talking about centrism, conservatism, or rather neoliberalism masquerading as conservatism. And of course, you guys get it. If you're watching, you know what the score is. But more importantly, I want to do a play-by-play of James Lindsay, because I wrote a little Substack article, which I'm curious what you guys think. If there's interest, I'll continue to do more content like that, because I want to give you guys some good stuff if that's what you want. So where do we begin? Well, first of all, I want to talk about, I went on a little podcast. I don't know exactly how you say it, so forgive me. This is a guy who I talked to yesterday, and thanks to Thomas, of course. Thomas, can't thank him enough for introducing me to this world in general, but reached out to Oros. I want to get that right, but super cool dude. And we had about a little over an hour and a half discussion talking about the 90s. And I want to shoehorn that in with this live stream, because I think it's very relevant. But we talked about how in the 90s, and I used the 80s as a reference point to have some comparison, but I talked about how in the 90s you sort of have this new enlightenment, this new revolution, as Thomas would call it. And a lot of the cultural shifts can be credited to the Seattle scene, which came out of the punk rock scene. I forgot to mention that. So we didn't really get into alternative rock or anything specific. It was a more broad discussion. And the other guy, Jay, who's a very cool person. So I was very honored to be welcomed on the show. Like I said, fast friends with very interesting people. And this is the kind of stuff that James Lindsay would never open himself up to. This is something that Lindsay, it's kind of funny calling him Lindsay, Anyways, I just think that, these kind of philosophical, political analysis, I know that I kind of criticized that and said it was too serious, but I think like the neocon phase or libertarian phase that people had, there is sort of this serious phase where everybody thinks that the ceiling is caving in. And I'm past that point. I've just, like with Twitter, when all these people got purged, they said, that's it, Twitter's gone, social media is gone. How are we going to tell people? And I just look at Twitter and I see that it's become a parody of itself. It's become a caricature. And the fact that it's gotten to that point, it makes me optimistic. And we talked about that towards the end of the show. I know it's a long video, but it seems like people on this side of the internet are good on that stuff. They don't mind binging all of this content. Academic Agent is a perfect example of that. There's obviously interest. And the fact that there is so much interest, and I think that video has over 11,000 views last I checked. Oh, wow, 16. So forgive me. This stuff is very popular, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes Lindsay made is on Twitter. He sort of condemned people like this side of the right, which is, Academic Agent's sphere. And it's not exclusive to him. There's a lot of, it's a very cool thing that's going on over here. Someone like Jordan Peterson should be privy to that stuff. Although I think he's a more good faith actor. I just think he doesn't get it. Again, a lot of the boomerism from the 60s is very prominent here. But somebody like Lindsay, I didn't even realize this, but the guy's an atheist. James Lindsay is an atheist. And so in that regard, based off of the stuff that he said and looking at his background, which we'll do in a second here, he's really no different than Sam Harris. He's no different than the intellectual dark web, which masquerades itself as this new right. But as we're seeing with the Academic Agent sphere, this is the new right. This is going to be the new cool thing. This is the new kids on the block, the code name Kids Next Door. And I don't know if they're not all Zoomers, so maybe I'm just projecting. When I talk to Paul Fahrenheit and the guys on Oros' stream, that is the future. That is, and it's nothing crazy. It's nothing to get scared about. It's not blackpilling. It's very optimistic. It's normal. It's just outside the centrist bubble. It's outside the Silicon Valley bubble, the DC bubble. And at one of the things that made me want to go on Oros' show, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but he talks a lot about community building. And I like the fact that you have that optimism on the side of the internet, which is always, black-pilled and everybody's disaffected, as people were in the 80s when they got into the 90s. I don't want us to become grunge. I don't want us to become angsty 90s, Spenglerians in the wrong sense, Spenglerian in this black-pilled sense. I don't want us to go there, okay? Because I don't want to be a hippie. I don't want to be a 90s. I don't want to be like the Seattle scene, which was this doom and gloom. We're not going to make it. I don't think that's true. And I defend the paleoconservatism. That's what got me interested in this stuff. And that's what gave me optimism. That's what made me see that, I think when we talked about on the other stream about people on this sphere, they latch onto philosophers, they latch onto Evola, Nietzsche, and they say, see, these guys are very pessimistic. They're looking at the world as is, and it's not looking good. So we got to tell people how bad things are getting. And we obviously should be aware of those things, but we should also understand that our enemies are going to be making mistakes. And Lindsay is the perfect example of that. So that's a long intro, I know. But if you haven't seen the interview with Oros, check that out. I think you guys will be interested in that. And it's on another channel, so if you're not subscribed, you probably didn't see it. But I think there's some good content there. Thomas was on, I think, on that weekend, Saturday or Sunday. So I think you guys, it's kind of a, the crime partners, right? That's what he says, the crime partners. So some, what do you call it? I'm blanking on a metaphor. Anyways, so you got the, not boomer, I'm not calling Thomas a boomer. You've got Thomas's generation and my generation, and so one of the reasons why I like to have him on the show is he brings that perspective, and I like to collaborate alongside that as equal partners. And so that's why I'd recommend Oros, these 2 episodes. And of course, I still have yet to really dive into his content. So just more stuff to look forward to. Again, our people need that stuff. And then what else? I think that's everything. I also want to tie this in with my Joe Rogan stream that I did. It was only about 17 minutes long, and this is definitely going to be an extension of that. I've covered a lot of the centrism already, but in that stream, because Joe Rogan apologized after Spotify put pressure on him, and he put out this like 5.5-minute apology video. And what else? That was sort of, it was perfect because, what was that example again? There was something relevant to the Joe Rogan thing specifically. But anyways, people that are privy to the show, you guys know that I like to talk about William F. Buckley and gatekeeping. And so what would the modern form of that be? What would the swindlers of the 21st century be? Well, we're going to be getting into our friend, James Lindsay. And Joe Rogan is part of the intellectual dark web. And so he's this, I know what it was. Because Thomas had a very perfect thread talking about summarizing what is this person stuck in 70s neoliberalism, stuck in the Milton Friedman Free to Choose lecture series form of politics. And he talked about how people like James Lindsay, people like specifically Joe Rogan, is the pseudo-curious intellectual. He's a person that talks about philosophy like Jordan Peterson. He talks about history. He's like Christopher Hitchens. He's this intellectual type. He's this academic type. And that's why I made the clickbait title. Who is the real academic agent? You know, who is the person that is really interested in politics, interested in philosophy, and who can bring some real reform, some reasonable path forward, and nothing crazy, nothing indefensible. Well, I see this panel on the cigar stream, and what is it? Evelyn and Charlemagne, Aaron McIntyre, and you got academic agent, of course. So you got a bunch of perspectives, and these guys go point by point. I mean, these guys are really, really well read. You know, I know Jordan Peterson goes on the stage and he cites authors, he cites examples, and that really dazzles the crowd. And I think if only people knew, if only people, you know, watched the 1992 Republican National Convention, if only they looked at populism, if they just stepped outside of the 70s and 90s, the 70s neoliberalism and the 90s atheism. And the 90s atheism is what led to the Reddit tier atheism. So anyways, I wanted to tie that in with our discussion with Oros because we got into how the 90s came about because the 60s generation grew up and they were sort of holding on to the counterculture from 3 decades prior. And so in the 90s, you had a lot of progressive music, progressive in terms of politics, not like progressive rock, but the grunge and the alternative rock was really the new hippie movement during the 90s. And we didn't really get into it on the show, or in the interview rather, but we talked about how if you're ever feeling blackpilled, if you think there's no hope, just remember, we don't want to end up like the 90s doom and gloom crowd, because I think that's and it's not too long ago too, so it's not totally foreign. I know a lot of these philosophical political analysis people, we've come so far, people have gone away from tradition to where they can't really recognize it. And reading about this stuff, I'm sure people interpret things in weird ways, but I just I want people to have reference points, and that's what this show is kind of meant to be, is to kind of help people in that way. Honestly, kind of like how Sam Hyde does his self-help videos. I think that's that matters, and I think we can sort of. I know people kind of use philosophy as self-help, but I don't mean it in that Albert guy, how he kind of or how Nietzsche becomes a self-help for people. We want to help people to discover Christianity, to sort of step outside of centrism without, without falling apart. So that's about all of the intro that I wanted to provide. And I want to check out, how long have we been? Oh, wow. I haven't even started what I wanted to do. So I'm sorry. Let me catch up with you guys. I see some regulars here. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. You guys keep the show alive. Big brain content. All right. I have also recently found out about this pocket of people talking about these ideas. And that's optimistic. That's white pilling. I know a lot of people, I would be more pessimistic if there wasn't like an academic agent network, if there wasn't a sort of organization on Twitter. And that's why I bring Twitter up a lot, is because we're going to look at one of James Lindsay's tweets, and it's ratioed, If Twitter was completely, how would you say, if it was completely co-opted and meaningless, you would not see this much critique from people who may not even have all the facts. So we're going to get into that in a second, but I want to catch up with you guys before we move on. Ain't seen nothing yet. So true, so true. Yeah, I know. Lindsay, yeah. When I found out he was an atheist, I was like, okay, I think that's when I started to write the article in Substack. In fact, I should pull that up to refresh my memory. We'll let me get another tab going. Yeah, when I read that, and he's just got this snarky in the wrong way, snarky in the counterproductive way. I think snarkiness can be appropriate, but when you have someone like Lindsay, who is so sure, and he's stuck in the 70s neoliberalism, 90s centrism. I got to bring up my libertarian friend as another example, because that's also relevant. Yeah. Remember when Sam Harris was basically framed as like right wing? There's that thread of, I think they're going after Joe Rogan, and there's a list of, because he's trying to prove that Joe Rogan is actually right wing, trying to prove that Joe Rogan, as Thomas referred to him, is he's actually a reactionary. He's actually a very dangerous person. And that's so ironic, because Joe Rogan is like a pothead. Joe Rogan is he is the epitome of like macho man's man. I think we talked about that in the other stream. I don't really remember everything I said in that other stream, so I hope I'm not being redundant, but as I mentioned earlier, Thomas's description is perfect. He is someone who graduated from Johnny Knoxville, and now he's like a Glenn Greenwald type. Now he's a Tulsi Gabbard, steps outside the box a little bit, but really just saying the media talking points. So again, it's nothing you haven't heard, but I just don't know how can DC produce more neo-atheism, more Reddit tier. It's just it's worse than Jordan Peterson, because it's like it's another Christopher Hitchens. That's what it is. I mean, it's like that. It's like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. You shouldn't even look it up because it's not really worth it. But there's that YouTube comment where somebody said, what if Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins, all these atheist types, what if they were like smoking weed together? What would they talk about? And it's like, oh, that's a real meeting of the minds. That's the cream of the crop in terms of historian, philosophy, politics. Oh, wow. Man, if only the ancient Greeks could see the progress we've made with Joe Rogan and you know, the what is it, the non-woke left, the what is it, the post liberals, isn't that what they call them, the Sorab Imi, I don't even, you know, the yeah, I think they call themselves that, post liberals. It's and they mentioned this on the cigar stream. Somebody mentioned that oh, actually, a point I wanted to make was, apparently, because I haven't read James Lindsay's books, and I wouldn't recommend anyone doing so unless you want to really try and get inside the guy's head. But apparently, based on the stream, he writes somewhere that liberalism actually can't be narrowed down. We can't really find out where it started. And so he talks about ancient Greece as something that he likes, and the Enlightenment, something that he likes. But beyond that, we can't really figure out political philosophy. We can't really narrow down history. And of course, that's very convenient, as someone pointed out, I think on Twitter, or it might have been during the cigar stream. I want to give, you know, this isn't me saying this, I want to give credit where it's due. Somebody said, well, he's really vague about liberalism, but he is defiant when he talks about Aaron McIntyre, academic agent types, that he can clearly define in black and white terms. And so doesn't that just say it all right there? You know, is that good faith? Is that good faith when one thing is so black and white, no nuance? But if push comes to shove for Lindsay, hey, so where exactly does your philosophy come from? Well, I like, you know, it's like with Nietzsche when we talked about how he's fixated on Dionysus. He likes the Greeks. Well, I really like this, and I really like that. So that really defines like American culture. That really defines the West, you know. So it's just very funny to kind of see the arguments start to fall apart, you know, the house of cards, literally. And of course, you guys know the score, but it's just funny. Again, our enemies are not smart. Our enemies are not, they're incompetent, you know. This is not the last time we're going to be seeing a James Lindsay type, another intellectual dark web type, you know, when they drag out another intellectual, you know. The DC is a factory of those types. So when infrastructure starts to get built, when, as Oro said, the community building, you know, I want to bring up California as an example. A lot of people are blackpilled because California is doomed, because we're not going to undo 30 years going back to Reagan when it became a blue state. We're never going to undo that in one election cycle. That's true. So when you see, you know, politicians failing, when you see social decay, that's not the ending. That's not the end of the cycle. There, you know, to be optimistic and contrast it with the Spenglerian Western cycle, there is still good things in the future. There is still infrastructure being built, and a lot of the hard work is done. So, and you know, what you can't allow to happen is the spirit. You cannot allow the media to get you down, because that's the whole purpose of it, you know. Alex Jones talks about that. It's that meme, if it were really hopeless, the propaganda would be useless. So I really want to stress again and again, things are really starting to turn around. Okay. And I want people my age to feel that. I want other people that are looking at the trajectory, you know, looking at the, you know, a metaphorical ticking clock of the West. It's really not all downhill. So I'll just say that. I really want to emphasize optimism. So, yo, Lady. Yeah, I saw Lady in the chat. Lady was, if you're still in here, I want to talk about Martin Scorsese, if you don't mind. I should have said that earlier just to sound the alarm off, but Lindsay made a fool of himself punching right. Yeah. Yeah, didn't know what he was in for. Thought that they were just a small, you know, thought it was just a couple of comments. But then again, that's what it took for him to backtrack. Anyways, we're gonna. I just want to give the play-by-play for infotainment value. Big Brain Content asks about, what is it? Comparing emo to grunge. You know, I mentioned this before I brought Thomas on board. I'd be kind of curious if you guys wanted to check out the music episodes that were uploaded before we got into politics and philosophy. I think that you guys might find that stuff a little interesting. But I talked about how alternative rock really set the stage for the 2000s. And Oros brought up, or asked rather, what is Generation Z's thing in terms of pop culture and music? What is something that they can claim as theirs? And I think we mentioned in the last stream, or one of the first streams in response to Academic Agent, we talked about how, you know, I sort of joked Hannah Montana, I joked, you know, Cartoon Network, but I mean, that is real. That's a real part of the culture. But I also mentioned, what was it? I lost it. Oh, I mentioned Hot Topic and how, yeah, I don't want to defend all of it, but there's elements of that do belong to Generation Z. And part of that is the emo scene. And maybe that's kind of maybe that's why we grasp onto people like Nietzsche and the pessimists of political philosophy. But that doesn't have to be the end point. That doesn't have to be the end point. I know a lot of people start on that road, they get on the Evola road, and then they don't stop. And to me, that reminds me of people that are stuck in the libertarian phase. They say, no, I've found everything in this small quadrant, and I'm just gonna, you know, not look at the optimists, because that's all, what do you call it? That's just cope. I don't think it is. I think that a lot of it is warranted. I think there's a lot of value in optimism. And I think that that's kind of the state of where we're at, is things turning around, as we're seeing with Lindsay. So I know people would say, like, hey, no big deal. A guy embarrassed himself on Twitter. But this is not exclusive to Lindsay. This is kind of a microcosm of what's happening in a lot of other things. You know, what we're seeing in Canada. Canadians, you know, Canucks are starting to be vocal. I mean, the people you would least expect are starting to get it. So that's why I say things aren't so bad. And I want people to feel that. Don't lose the spirit. This is actually live. Yes, subject to change. This is live. You put Barry Weiss on the right-wing side of that list. Oh, that's the other thing too. On that list, you had, did I interrupt myself? Did I never finish that? Wow. Sorry about that. So on that list, somebody who made a thread saying, here is proof that Joe Rogan is right-wing. Oh, that's right. And then we got into the, anyways, I almost did it again. You had that list that said, you know, he does bring on left-wing people and it's public figures. And then on the right, he had like Sam Harris was identified as right-wing. And it's like, if you don't understand religion, I'm sorry, but it's hard to define yourself. It's more difficult to define yourself as right-wing. I mean, to not see the validity in that. And who else, man? It was like it was parody who was being included on the right. Yeah, Barry Weiss, who works for the New York Times. I mean, regime media is being defined in that way. That just goes to show, I mean, how do you not get it at this point that, I mean, punching right, well, yeah, I guess you should punch right if we're going to include the most milquetoast, centrist, boring commentators. Yeah, don't watch that content. And people need to get bored of that stuff. Big Brain Content asks, do you think Lindsay is earnest in his critique of CRT, or is he glowing? I don't know. I think kind of like Matt Walsh from Daily Wire. I don't think I can't really tell if he's in good faith or masquerading really closely, but that's kind of the thing when we talk about Conservative Inc. and Populist Inc. is also true. It's so hard to tell, but the distinction is, notice Matt Walsh's rhetoric is far superior than Lindsay's. You know, he's graduated from the Roger Scruton conservatism, and he's gotten into something interesting. You know, he's talking like Robert Putnam. He's sounding like Sam Huntington. And when you look at Lindsay, he is still stuck in the Milton Friedman talking points. And he doesn't even talk about the Thomas Sowell social talking points. You know, he is someone that would probably stick to the economics, you know, to stay safe. And so when he critiques something like CRT, okay, yeah, congratulations. Matt Walsh has made more progress on that front, and he's someone that I don't even fully trust. So I can't really tell, and that's the state of the intellectuals that we're seeing. So yeah, I mean, that question in itself needs to be asked. Hey, it's really weird how all these people sound like us, and we can't even tell if it's genuine. Well, the fact that those talking points are out there, the fact that you have Tucker, you know, Tucker should be the default. Tucker should be something that, you know, worth striving for. So I hope I answered your question. Critical theories, is that where he talked about, is that where he said he doesn't know where liberalism originates? And it's like, well, then why are you somebody said on the cigar stream, you're not reading with a capital R, you're just skimming, or you have a high school memory of philosophy. So cynical theories perhaps. Yeah, I mean, I remember Academic Agent specifically, he really emphasized, like, this is the most, I'm not trying to mimic how he sounds, but he was like, this is the most entry-level, embarrassing, boring talking point describing how liberalism in Lindsay's mind is born out of the Enlightenment, so Thomas Jefferson and John Locke. And I think there was some utilitarianism that he would defend. Okay, all this safe stuff. And beyond that, don't really know, not really sure. You know, somebody who's not really well read, and I'm not really well read for what it's worth. I never claimed to be. Again, when I checked out Academic Agent last month, you know, one of the things people like us recognize is hierarchy. So we don't try to call shots. We don't try to jump to conclusions and say, oh, hey, I'm like an influencer, the way Jordan Peterson fancies himself, the way people go on Joe Rogan and they probably get an ego boost out of that. We recognize our roles. It doesn't have to be spectacular. We're content with hierarchy, but someone like Lindsay has to be a celebrity, you know, has to me. Yeah, lady. Mention your second favorite. I know it's your first favorite. Scorsese film is. What's the second? Okay, because that's probably a more interesting question when you ask someone lists or degrees of variation. Okay, the best and the worst. Most people could probably narrow similar conclusions. So let's get to the interesting middle ground. Barrel roller. What is this stream? It's not exactly what he said, but yeah, we're going to be talking about. I haven't even started yet. I'm going through the comments. I just wanted to do a play-by-play, reiterate some of the stuff on the cigar stream, just because this is funny. This is Twitter content to keep you guys in good spirits, to remind you guys that this isn't just a fluke. It's not just one person does something counterproductive on Twitter. We're going to be getting a lot of these victories, and I'm very optimistic about the power that academic agent sphere has on Twitter. It's just very encouraging to see. It should take all of you guys out of nihilism. It should really be something. So, anyways, you guys are too kind, man. You guys are really hitting it off. I appreciate it. I can't be grateful enough for you guys. Yeah, Lindsay girl slapped right and got decked. True. That's what happened. Every time. Dr. Phil had Lindsay on his show, really? Said it smells Hegelian? Really? Yeah, no, if that's the competition, I honestly, I don't think we're gonna have to worry too much, really. I think that you're listening at 2 times speed. Wow, how does that sound? Yeah, Sam Hyde. Yeah, I would rather take any advice from Sam Hyde over Sam Harris. That's I think we could all agree to that, of course. Subject of Change says James doesn't know how to adjust for people who aren't well read. That's true. He didn't read the room. That's why Twitter is a very good place still. There's still a lot of decentralization. It's similar to how in the 90s you had reality TV, or not reality TV. The precursor to that was Jerry Springer talk shows where there was no talking, right? For those that remember, if there's any 90s people watching, there was a lot of decentralization in media. And I didn't get into that within the Oros interview, unfortunately, but stuff like that was so optimistic, cool to see how you could invite anybody on the show. You could have debates. You could have, it was like Crossfire. It was really a real, even Phil Donahue, who was legit, was conceding to a lot of, remember this, okay? Remember this. Phil Donahue was legit, legacy media, legacy pundit, and he conceded with this dissident, chaotic sort of, I'm being respectful, people like us, dissident, decentralized, non-academic, outside the DC sphere. He conceded to that audience because it was in high demand. Think about that. Does that sound familiar? Okay. You have a commentator, kind of like with the Matt Walsh stuff, he can't just be a shill for Daily Wire. He has to concede the talking points. He has to sound like Tucker. that's where everything's moving. That's what's going to be the default, as it should. We're going to get real conservatism. And when you see someone like Phil Donahue in the 90s concede, albeit the circumstances are in television and we're talking about political commentators, it's really not that far apart. It's because the audience is there, like on Twitter, when Lindsay gets ratioed and then he does a tweet saying, I'm actually not going to go after the right anymore. That shows that we have the upper hand. We have the advantage. We're not that far away from victory, okay? We're in a very good spot right now, okay? Now's not the time to be discouraged. Think about that. Think about how Phil Donahue had to give up, not just talking to Ron Paul, Ralph Nader types. It was a circus show on the Donahue show. And, I know I don't know what you guys think. I have no strong feelings about this. I'm just going to say it. When Curtis Yarvin went on Tucker, that is a shifting of the Overton window, for better or worse. I don't want to, again, no strong attachment. I'm just saying that as an example. I don't think that's an isolated case. I don't think that's just, oh, who cares? And then our ex guy got on Twitter, or on TV rather. Things are starting to go our way, and something to keep in mind. Man, we got to... Donahue used to be on the TV late at night in the UK when I was a youngster. Oh, really? I want to know, because I know the Sex Pistols they went on that show. It was the biggest British talk show in the UK. I don't even know the guy's name. I think it's Billy Graham. Lady, if I'm misremembering, please correct me. There was a British talk show that was like our Oprah, and the Sex Pistols went on there, and that's the only reason I know who he is because he went on there and he was out of touch. He was trying to interview them like they were just another band, and they're cussing on camera. They're saying, you can imagine it's a punk band. Okay, this is Punk Attitude live on air, uncut, uncensored, and that's kind of like what Lindsay experienced. I'm sort of going in different directions here, but forgive me if it's too decentralized. This is what happens when there's no script for the show. It's just sort of chaos. But so the first analogy is that's basically what's happening to Lindsay right now. Aaron McIntyre, academic agent, is Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious. And if the guy's name is Billy Grundy, thank you, Bill Grundy, and he was drunk. Is that true? He seemed like he was collected though, so that's a little interesting. Bill Grundy, thank you, Mike. Yeah, that was. Anyways, I was going somewhere with that. I was asking what, from a UK perspective, from a British perspective, excuse me. I wonder during the 90s when you have Jerry Springer pushing the envelope, you have this decentralized FCC isn't really censoring anything. They're it's like the Wild West on TV. And, Tarantino pushing the envelope with cinema, things going in it's like going back to the 70s grit of the film industry. I wonder from what is the British counterpart to all that? Is that one of the cultural aspects that we sort of spread to Europe? I'm curious if Britain was trying to catch up to be the British counterpart to what America was doing. I don't know, because I'm not an Anglo, so. Grundy disgraced himself. It was the end of his career. Rotten exposed him for the dreadful old hypocrite he was. Yeah, hey, like I said with the Donahue example, It's the same thing, man. It's the same. And I want to visualize this like a stone toss cartoon. I think we're very visual thinkers, even though we're bookworms on the side of politics. I think the visual representation is very important. And so somebody mentioned they wanted more pop culture critique because that's something that's lacking in a lot of these dissident circles. I would like to provide that and sort of put that to the forefront in case anybody forgets. And I remember there was a Twitter space with Joel Davis talking about WWE versus James Hetfield. Maybe you guys remember what I'm talking about. This is before he got banned, of course. But it was an analogy. And I know that sounds really strange out of context, but yeah, I think what he was going for is because Metallica sold out, so you have all this different eras. Metallica is not a catch-all term for metal. It's actually very difficult. It's actually a band that I guess early on you could consider a representation of metal, but their latter career is really far from it. And so you don't really want to just say Metallica. That can mean a lot of things. And WWE also had eras, the Attitude Era. Another thing I forgot to bring up during the Oros interview. I mean, you had the 90s was crazy, man. With what was on television, the film industry changing, Martin Scorsese, and WWE Attitude Era, and then Woodstock 99 on the very last year of the decade, year of the century. I mean, that is the most American decade by 20th century standards. In the century of ideology, what could define Americana in its latter progression with trash TV? I mean, Andrew Dice Clay, Chuck Leary. I mean, that was in high demand. The politically incorrect. I know that's kind of like a cringe term now, but the vulgar humor being in high demand to the point where Phil Donahue's conceding. I mean, we're sort of entering that stage in the 21st century with the centrism reaching its expiration date. Something to think about, I think. And not that that's original either. I'm just, like I said, I want to be a spectator looking at all this stuff and running it by you guys too. Yes, Mike, he asked, so Lindsay actually made a tweet saying he wasn't going after the right? What happened was he basically said, upon introspection, upon some reflecting, as if it's an epiphany, right? As if it's a moment of clarity. You know, let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? There's actually a lot of SJWs. There's a lot of wokeism that really needs to be addressed. So maybe we should take a break from Aaron McIntyre. Maybe we should not punch right, because that didn't work out so good on Twitter. It was immediate, the reaction and the unpopularity of Lindsay's critique of the dissident right. And so he said, maybe we should let's what is it? Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about something else. Oh, I'm losing the argument. Hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, okay? That's what happened. That's what happened behind the scenes. Maybe he was drunk. That's another aspect of Twitter. We don't really know. I would like to know the state of mind when Lindsay's tweeting out this stuff. Where is he? Is he checking out the timeline? When he opens up his notifications and sees Aaron McIntyre's following, not holding back, are they going to... You got to imagine Lindsay's thinking, oh, that's... I'm used to the DC, I'm used to the centrist appeal to authority, and not even the right kind of authority, right? Us authoritarians, we would like appeal to authority, but not the current regime. Appeal to authority in the sense of centrism, in the sense of mainstream appeal, commercial, commodified politics. And you can just imagine him being at home, looking at his notifications. I mean, that thought alone should get you through another day. The fact that, you know, a show like this, a show like Charlemagne, Prudentialist, those guys can go on Twitter and boss around James Lindsay. Pretty funny stuff. Saving face, says Mike. Exactly. That's great to hear. White. Exactly, Mike. White pill. I think Aron has too much sway for Lindsay to have gone directly at like that. Yeah, that's true. They can't totally disregard the dissident right because it is so popular. So think about that. We're not just the punching bag. Oh, Women Rock. I watched the first few seconds of that video. I didn't get through it yet. I've been meaning to. Is that good stuff? Trad Dad says Beavis and Butthead was the embodiment of us 90s white boys. Metal skate. Yeah. Yeah, it really was. It was skater culture, skater boy, Avril Lavigne. Yeah. Dude. Hold on. Sorry, I have to reach for a second. Listen, guys, listen. Calling all patriots. Look, man. Before you say it's all over, we're not too far away from our roots. We're not too far away from normalcy. You don't have to get stuck in the pessimism. That can be a phase, just like the libertarian phase, just like the Nietzsche obsession. That doesn't have to be the ending point. The 90s wasn't that long ago, and everything went. Anything goes. That should be the motto of the 90s. Just don't worry, man. We're returning. We're not returning to the. We're not returning too far back. We just, and you know, it's funny. Lindsay probably revels in the 90s anti, you know, like post-liberalism in the 90s, and he's probably revels in the 90s culture to an extent, but it wasn't just neoliberalism. It was also not too far away from the Buchanan Brigade. And it was before the 2000s. It was before W. Bush. So, you know, I know the Clintonian years were not especially good, but the 90s wasn't all bad. And I think with Lindsay falling apart at the seams, we're gonna be able to get back our trash TV. We're gonna be able to get back our Attitude Era. Don't worry, man. The 90s spirit can still be saved. So, anyways. Anyways, what do you guys think about that? Let's go. Return to Skater Boy. Yes, so true, subject. Hey, and Avril Lavigne, I think, what was it, last year? New album. Sounded pretty good. All right. Maybe you guys aren't into that. I'm curious. But hey, immortal. Or not immortal, excuse me. But she did that TikTok with Tony Hawk. Look, man, we're aging very well. We're not reaching our expiration date like neocons, okay? You go to the Bill Crystal fan club, what are you gonna see there? You're gonna see dinosaurs. You're gonna see, what is it, the Weekly Standard? Yeah, the Quillette. What's that broad's name? Claire L something. These are the competition up against academic agent Aaron McIntyre. I got to bring Aaron McIntyre to talk about Striper. That's got to happen. If you guys could relay that to him, that topic alone deserves an isolated episode. Neo, Fox, grunge. Grunge without the pessimism. Grunge. And not to be totally devoid of emotion, but grunge without the 60s baggage that came to define it, the progressivism that came to define it, you know? Grunge when it was just ripping off the Ramones. That's the grunge we want. Not this staring at our shoes music. Like I remember someone calling it that. Not flannel rock. Not stripped down. Makes me want to feel nostalgic for folk rock. If you're doing that, you're reaching a new depth for music. So yeah, the Quillette. That's like the epiphany of fake, like pseudo rag, pseudo. Like imagine you're subscribed to the newsletter from Claire. Yeah. Yeah. Hard hitting stuff at the Quillette. Man. It's so boring. Shoegaze can be okay. I don't know, man. You're gonna have to introduce me to the right bands, David the Gnome. Help me out. Here, let me. I'm gonna try to anyways, yeah, back to Fresh Prince. Let's unironically go back to Fresh Prince, can we? Upper middle class noise music. There you go. Yo, what's going on? Destiny's Tiny Coke. Just found your channel. Love your streams with Thomas777. Thank you. Destiny's the tiny. Oh, is it Coke? I thought it was cake. Destiny's Tiny Coke. Thank you. Thomas, man. Really, really opened a lot up for me. Got me to stop taking things so seriously. Got me to really strive in the pop culture critique of politics as opposed to this narrow philosophical. You know, well, how do I say this? I want to choose my words carefully. I think it would do Keith Woods better to get into the Zoomer ecosystem mindset, get into the pop culture side as well. I think especially this year, I think he's getting a little serious. I want him to step out of that, if I can say that. You know, I don't want to. It's not a critique. I'm just throwing that out there. Recommendation, if you will. Anyways, I think Avril Lavigne feels like a lifetime ago, but the comeback is already here. So it's not gone. It's not a bygone era. The Zoomer spirit, you know, the the Geist, the Hegelian, what is it? Phenomenology of the spirit. Okay. Don't be discouraged. Women Rock, yeah. The new Bond film. I didn't see that. I thought that was interesting. He talked with Tyler Hamilton about The Shining. See, stuff like that. Stuff like that. And it shouldn't be exclusive to holidays. You know, it should be somewhat of a pattern. Yeah. I mean, I enjoy watching reviews of stuff that I don't have anyway. That's a kind of a strange hobby, but Red Letter Media, I really like. I really can't get enough of those guys. And maybe I'm just obsessed with commentary. Maybe that's what draws people into the academic agent sphere. It is interesting. And maybe I want to make myself feel smart. Maybe people like to imagine themselves in that room. If any of you guys are college students, if you could have a real college tour of real intellectuals, real conversations with no censorship, without any restriction on real free speech. What did Keith discuss with the movie? The Shining? Yeah, that was back, what was that, last Halloween? I don't, at that time, I don't think I was really invested in his videos yet. I think I was, actually, I don't know about that. Anyways, I don't know exactly what he said. Tyler Hamilton, he looks at horror movies through the perspective of a Catholic theologian. And I mean, through that perspective. And it's interesting because I don't know where the line is with horror movies because I'm Catholic. And I'm interested what is the appropriate stuff to watch and whether certain things are out of bounds. And I know evangelicals in the 80s were concerned about metal bands and gory movies, and rightfully so, because back then, as I said in the Oros interview, that was a time when there was a standard for society. And so it's easy for us to stick our nose up at that stuff as, oh, it's parents and teachers making rules for the youth. But I think that is warranted, especially to circle back to what someone said about CRT. I mean, that's what we're seeing now. There should be people, and Oros said this, whenever parents complain about anything, people roll their eyes like that's a cliche, and it shouldn't be like that. But to bring it back to The Shining, I know evangelicals are critical of pop culture and movies, as they should, and music too. I'm curious, where does the alarmism end and the legitimate concern begin? I'm curious if anybody could help me out with that. I was told to consult classical theists which I think you guys should check out. That's another cool philosophy channel. I think he said he's a Dionysian. I'm probably not saying that right, but you guys should check that out. Classical theist. I think he would have, that's someone who I would trust for answers. Yo, bass guitarist, my guy. Love this guy, man. We just did a Van Halen video. Was really impressed with his ranking. He's got a new single coming out, which I will review on this channel. He's got new music coming out. Can't wait to hear it. I got a little teaser, and it was classic, man. It was classic. The tone, I don't know how you do it, man. You've got the sunset sound. You've got, that's what Warren DeMartini would appreciate. So, no, I was really impressed. Seriously, that sounds straight out of the 80s. And I know with a lot of these newer bands, I don't know if you're checking them out, but there's always this pseudo new metal stuff, if that makes sense. To bring it back to what we were talking about with the 90s, and also the masquerading intellectuals, there's this, like, there is good new metal, and it does sound like the old school stuff. Then there's a certain strain that's obviously trying to mimic the production, and not that we should hold it against them. We want that effort. That should be the standard. But sometimes I don't know, the result is very, it's that whole thing about what does it mean to be cool? It's putting in a lot of effort without looking like you're putting in a lot of effort. It's the same thing with music. If you're trying too hard to be nostalgic, then it doesn't really work, if that makes sense. Oh, no. I didn't mean new. I meant like brand new metal music. I didn't mean NU metal, which is ironic that they call it that because it's not new anymore. It's like 20 years old now. I think Scott talked about that or said that. So yeah, that's what the intellectual dark web is. It's, you know, it's the same talking points from 40 years ago, but because it's a new generation, they don't investigate that much further. And because Lindsay is content with his sort of, what would you call it? His primitive, by the numbers philosophy, he wants everyone else to abide by that standard too. And all people like Academic Agent are asking for is just read more books. I think I heard that he hasn't even read Spangler. And it's like, if this is your job, don't you at least for your own, I mean, shouldn't you be prepared for the people to the right of you? That's the other thing about gatekeeping, is they completely disregard, out of fear, investigation. And it's like, you guys can read a book. You guys can Google figures who, and it's the shackle thinking. It's guilt by association, you know. Have you ever heard somebody say, "Oh, I don't want that on my search history. I don't want the government seeing that I looked that up." And that standard should only apply to pornography. That's the only thing that you shouldn't be looking up. But when it comes to political philosophy, when it comes to learning from history, yeah, you should read for your own curiosity to. Anyways, just read more books. Are you quoting me? Or did someone else say that? Yeah, I mean, but like really, like Lindsay would be offended. I mean, oh, a decline of the West. Whoa, wait a second, man. That's really pessimistic. As opposed to what? Saying we need to go back to 1995? In a bad way, too. Go back to 1995 because that's when Christopher Hitchens could say whatever he wanted and gatekeep, right? It's all controlled. It's all. Yeah, that's you want to talk about dissent. You want to talk about danger, reading books, okay? And that's really what most people do. So there's nothing scary about that. Just poor guy Lindsay. Scared of a couple of pages. Scared of, hey, for those that are watching still, I don't agree with this broad. I mean, look at the way she looks, frankly. Dude, you see that? My mom was like, whoa, what are you doing, big guy? Yeah, I don't even here, one sec. I don't even agree with maybe anything in this book, but it's like, you know what this did do is get me into fiction. So I guess for that, thank you, Russian broad, for thank you, selfish woman. Thank you. Oh man, I need to reel it in a little bit, but yeah, thanks, Ein. Whatever, man. Yeah, I mean, reading is scary, Lindsay. Reading is the real endpoint, right? What else we got? Hey, how come Keith wasn't on the academic agent stream? Wasn't his name attached to it originally? I don't know if you guys know the inside baseball on that. I was interested to, because he's also in that sphere. It was a lot of people, so I don't know what the limit is for StreamYard or whatever they use. Will be interesting. Oh, I met Woods. Yeah, Woods. I think his name was, if I remember right. Because if you saw that tweet from Academic Agent, it was like, whoa, it's a lot of people. How are you gonna? I imagine everybody's talking points kind of got recycled, but I mean, good minds think alike, so they're gonna be able to dish it out. So, oh really? Did there used to be beef with Keith and Academic Agent? That's interesting. See, stuff like that's interesting to me. Not to pick a side. I'm just saying. You know, it's like internet blood sports. I miss that. I had to go back and check it out after the fact, but that's what I do. That's what I've been doing for, I guess, years now, technically. I mean, reading back on the history to learn all those lessons, people like Sargon. I mean, that's another perfect caricature of somebody like Lindsay, how he stays in his box, and if anybody else doesn't, that's seen as crazy, right? So it's all just recycled. You know what? Yeah, what's the next generation of blood sports? What's going to be? I don't know. We don't have. We don't really have a lot of. All the internet commentators are kind of doing their own thing. So there's not like competition outside of this Lindsay type scandal. I don't know. There's not a lot of back and forth the way there used to be. You know what I mean? I don't know how long you guys have been around, so maybe you guys can speak on it better than me. Man. Then again, it's kind of hard to pick topics now, right? I guess it would be contingent on the current events. So. Oh. Um, Yo, sunglasses? Yeah. See, that's what men do. Men make up. They don't hold grudges the way women do. No offense. I'm just saying. Generally speaking. That's cool to hear, you know. And you sort of learn from your friend after a beef. So, not that you should start beefs to get to that point. I'm just saying, if that happens, remember that that's your friend. Excuse me. Um, so who is the real academic agent? Yeah, let me just do this right now so we can answer that question for you. It's a clickbaity title, admittingly. But here is super tough guy, James Lindsay. And do you see that up there? Dude. Yeah. Yeah, I'll say. So emotional and sensitive. Conceptual James. Conceptual James, you know? Like Nietzsche builds the Superman, Rand builds the Randian Superman, you know, which just what kind of husband she wants, really. That's what it comes down to. Conceptual James Lindsay. Conceptual James taking you to places you've never thought before, taking you to 1970s free to choose lecture series, Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, the founding fathers, the new founding fathers. This is the real enlightenment. We have learned so much from Rousseau, from Locke, John Locke, and now 20th century, the century of ideology. And according to James Lindsay, that's a great thing because now we can reduce human nature to something within the confines of rhetoric, within positivist influenced, just reductive categories. And thankfully we can do that. Thankfully we don't have to get metaphysical, because that would be dangerous. That would be scary. We would have to read books to do that. Thankfully, because of the safe milquetoast commentators, we can just stick to the basics, okay? Roger Scruton, be careful with that. Be careful with that Roger Scruton book. Be careful about beauty and the good, okay? What about relativism? What about the scientific method? You're going to throw that out too? What about making the peasants not feel like peasants, okay? What about that? Conceptual James. All right? Don't go near that library. Don't go near that library. We wouldn't want to do that. We wouldn't want to step outside the concept laid before us by James. Anyways, yes. So, brilliant mathematician, philanthropist, and overall cool guy, James Lindsay. The woke have been exposed. So right off the bat, a lie. Right off the bat, wrong. The woke don't really care that you know what they're up to. They're not really hiding it. So don't really know why that's a gotcha. We now need to keep fighting them out of power, obviously. But we need to also turn our attention to the smug. Smug. So who's that in reference to? Who is the most smug, dissident right personality on the internet? Gotta be careful. Gotta be careful about the right. And more importantly, we gotta shut it down. Gotta shut it down, man. These men are free thinking. These are free thinkers up against the Lindsay fan base, up against the almost 300K bot followers. Very impressive. Cool website, dude. New discourses. Yo, I want a new discourse. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Dude, this is crazy. Oh, man, dude. It's a lot of stuff. I don't know, man. I'm not really familiar with a lot of these talking points. Man. I don't know. I hope I don't have to read. Are these books you're recommending? I don't know, man. Be careful with that stuff. So, you have this very articulate tweet. And then Matt Boos, who's a cool guy. Didn't get as much react compared to everybody else, but this is it right here. We must turn our attention to the intellectual dark web, anti-woke, liberal grifters trying to go up the right. Exactly. Exactly. Second city bureaucrat. Just like Sorab, Army, the post-liberals. I forgot what their term was. Yeah, all these people were neocons like 5 years ago. All these people were libertarian. And they basically still are in that bubble. It's just a paint job. They went to the GTA Pay and Spray, and now they are conservative intellectuals. So it's just, I mean, it is just brutal honesty. Yeah, it is just brutal honesty in the comments. And so he made this tweet where he said, where he backed off. I don't know where it's at, but he said, after doing some rethinking, after getting ratioed, I think it's in everyone's best interest, exclusively mine, to move on from this and just pretend like I'm one of you guys. Let's go back to when you guys thought it was cool. When don't look into my very basic background. This guy has the background of every DC academic type. To answer someone's question in the comments, who is the real academic agent? It's these guys. It's everyone who's sympathetic to these guys. These guys are reading books, if you can believe it. These guys are thinking things through and stepping outside of the 70s neoliberalism. This guy is an author. And look, I've bought in politics books. If you need to get started, and that's the key term, started with politics, you need something to grab onto. But that doesn't have to be the end point. And you look at this guy is just a swindler. He is Lindsay began using the middle initial A in order to write his books about atheism and leftism, very underreported topics. That's pretty underground, man. In American pop culture, atheism and hyperliberalism, that's really obscure. No one's gonna know what you're talking about, Lindsay. They're gonna have to read some books. So, yeah, centrism right here, okay? Centrism in all its glory, in all of its mediocrity. This is the article I was talking about. I think it's not that long, but it really gets into the dynamics of James Lindsay. And I feel like I've just been doing a recycled stream at this point, but I mean, to bring my libertarian friend up again, you know, he makes fun of me because he calls me Burkean, as if that's an insult. Edmund Burke, conservative. And that was the standard, you know. Russell Kirk, another great example of conservatism before the gatekeeping, before National Review. Because National Review is the beginning of people like this being galvanized, people like this having a platform. And even though William F. Buckley was rightfully skeptical of Ayn Rand, that I do think was something he did that was appropriate. The conservatism that exists the 50s and before, that's all we're trying to encourage people to check out and just to give it a fair hearing. That's as far as people like academic agent Sphere would like to shout out. But people like Lindsay are very, very afraid of curiosity, very afraid of free speech. So anyways, I would encourage you guys to check this out. So I apologize for shilling, but I'd like to tap in with you guys what you think about this newsletter, because I might do some more if there's interest. So I'm just trying to read the room on this. Anyways, I want to catch up with you guys again. Man, you guys. Is somebody asking if I'm Persian? I think academic agent is Persian. As far as I know, I'm not. It's 5 a.m. in England. Well, thank you, Sunglasses. I appreciate you stopping by. I always like seeing the familiar names in here. Migrating over from academic agent. This is a pit stop, right? This is like the gas station in Twin Peaks season 3, episode 8. That's what this is. The George Romero knockoff episode. That's what this is. This is the double R diner of the dissident right. This is the double R diner of the internet. That's what this is. Conceptual idiot. Oh, man. Man, you guys are overwhelming me over here. What are you going to do when the academic agency goes wild on you? Yeah, not going to do much, honestly. Gonna write another tweet, apologize, backtrack, take back your what is it? Gonna walk back your statements because you realize the internet is bigger than your 300K astroturfed audience. Yo, your body watched the Van Halen episode with me and asked, what are you? I'm Irish. That's what I am. True. I am Irish. Tell him that. What are you? Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, what more could I say? What else is there to say? I also wanted to say or bring up another example. Bring it back to the pop culture critique. Some of you are privy to this already. Whoops. Excuse me. Anyways, does this character look familiar to you guys? For those of you that are still on Twitter, and you should be, so you don't miss the white pills, you don't miss the good content that is still in circulation, despite the purging, despite them trying to take the positive spirit away from us. They can't. It's impossible. What is it? Amy Therese? I think that's how you say it. She went after someone you're very familiar with. There was a bit of a back and forth, and she had a very similar reaction as Lindsay. I'm surprised I haven't seen people making this comparison, but this was the beef that predated Lindsay, because I had only recently started checking out new discourses, but she did it in strides, talking about we need to punch right, we need to gatekeep the right. These guys are reading books, how dare they? And so, once again, another pseudo-intellectual, another stuck in the 20th century centrist. And again, graduated from Johnny Knoxville and got to what is the peak of philosophy? What do you grab onto the most? What is that guy, Albert Camus or whatever? Yeah, that is these guys as heroes. That is the extent that they will read. And so she's actually bringing up a very relevant example, because in the Joe Rogan stream, we talked about how Joe Rogan doesn't really care about free speech. He'll apologize when push comes to shove. And the fact that he's an MMA guy of all things, he is going to cave to multinational corporations after he talks to Tulsi Gabbard and all of these, Jimmy Dore, people that are still progressive. They just like Lindsay, they believe in returning to another form of liberalism, expecting it not to escalate. And, Dee Snider, who I heard is Christian, so I don't want to be too harsh, but he's also very obnoxious on Twitter. And so listen to this tweet, okay? Because even though this is supposed to be satire, this is what she believes at her roots, Not going to defend Neil Young or Joni Mitchell, but you do have to admit that free speech is under attack. Really, Amy? Free speech is under attack? People are being persecuted for being normal people? Well, who does that sound like? What was she doing to Keith last year? Does anybody remember? I'm sure people have already said it in the comments, but she was one of the most ruthless critics against Keith. And it's just so funny, you know. Yeah, the Democrat speech police. Got to watch out for the blue team. The blue team, who is the only thing in the world in philosophy and politics. You can only read Dinesh D'Souza books if you want to find out anything about modernity. And D. Snyder, you know, I know that this is kind of a contrarian take, but I defend Tipper Gore and the PMRC for being concerned. I mean, just on that front alone, yeah, you should be concerned about the 80s decadence. Look what it led to. Look at the 90s. You know, it's a funny example, but look at the two Bill and Ted movies. One is very 80s and one is very 90s, and they're only 2 years apart. Look how fast the culture shifts. So yeah, there's going to be concern. There's going to be, I mean, as if it's the end of the world to have moms talking about, yeah, my daughter's coming home with this Madonna album and it's explicit, you know? And I mentioned, this is the example that everyone makes fun of, but Elvis is swinging hips. People, oh, that's the cliche. Elvis is swinging hips isn't endangering anybody. But if you look at something like Beatlemania, that's radical in 50s society. That's, the overreaction is totally warranted. How else could you expect people to, you know, the music is having that effect on the youth? Of course there's going to be some backlash, you know. So somebody like D. Snyder, you know, he is still mad at his parents. He is still stuck in the bubble. So I don't know. I mean, he calls himself Christian. He should understand the limitations of society, the limitations of materialism, you know. And how about just not saying anything? Do you have to show up? He always brags about this. He stood up to Congress. He didn't do anything. It was nothing. So kind of a 2-for-1 deal. Amy Therese, who's a side character, and then D. Snyder, kind of a blast from the past. And they're really part of the same kind of sphere of influence, sphere of thinking. So anyways. Yo, I'm seeing more familiar names. Let's go. Yeah, I think pop culture, that's a good point, bass guitarist. To tie it in with my take, pop culture we can't afford to neglect, because if we stick to the super serious philosophy and politics, we're going to be left behind. And Tyler Hamilton talks about this. I don't know if he's correct, but he looks at horror movies, and as you know, as Christians, I don't know if there's limitations to that. There might be. I would just ask the question if it is. And you can tap into where society is going, and it's a way to check in on modernity. So yeah, I know Tipper Gore and the Washington Wives. That's so, what are you guys so upset about? It's just music. People listen to edgy music and then they're normal. Well, it's normalizing some visual things. Oros talked about art is supposed to reflect the good, you know, like in the Renaissance. Someone on the cigar stream mentioned art should be calculated. It shouldn't just be relative. That's how you get, you know, that's how you get new metal, you know, depending on what you know, fill in the blank with your least favorite part of modernity in the pop culture world, whether it's music or movies, being derivative. I know that Marvel's the easy go-to. You know, it doesn't have to stay in that formula, but you gotta be aware of that stuff. Steve Vai was on Bogus Journey? I didn't know that. You know, this might sound cringe. Bogus Journey kind of, or wait a second. No, I think it was Excellent Adventure. Oh, okay, that's why. Okay. Excellent Adventure kind of got me interested in Joan of Arc, like unironically. So, hey man, pop culture having some benefits there. My parents wouldn't allow me to watch music videos when I was a kid. Yeah, I mean, I know people like to be critical of parents that are overly protective of that stuff, but from a political perspective, I mean, especially now, it's mandatory. If the 80s concerned people could see it the 90s, you know, they were right, all of their concerns. That's why the 90s, I think, is a good reference point. It's when everything became, it's when it was like no holds bar, you know? If you've ever seen David Lee Roth's, I think it's No Holds Barbecue, which that might sound weird out of context, but try and get through that video. It's like a Sam Hyde skit. You know, it is. I might have to show that to some people. That's a pretty good comparison. You know, I think David Lee Roth has a lot of value to people that like Sam Hyde's form of sense of humor. I've been trying to kind of get Zoomers to revel in the David Lee Roth persona. I think because and if bass guitarist is still here, Van Halen should be the Gen Z anthem. That should be their band. That should be the rally cry. Because there's a lot of that Sam Hyde humor is in David Lee Roth. I don't know if bass guitarist wants to pitch in, but you know, Roth's interviews, his character, it's very, I don't want to say postmodern, but it's this Andy Kaufman style that really breaks the conditioning. Yeah, PMRC was based. That's what I'm talking about. You know, I remember, I think Pat Buchanan was also a defender of that. And maybe his choice of words were different. We don't have to look too deeply into that. But hey, if we're Buchananites, if we're paleocons, paleo-libertarians, you know, you got to start to rethink some of your cultural views that you've had by default. Roth won't shut up, but I found his Rogan interview interesting. Yeah, that's the thing. You could call it a downside. He's an egomaniac. But then again, people on our side cling to Kanye. So I think people can understand it from that perspective. He is this caricature that I think warrants our attention, especially in the 21st century. I'm specifically thinking of his 80s interviews, you know. That's the kind of energy you need to have. That's the kind of optimism I want to see Zoomers have. I want them, like someone said earlier, the skater punk, skater boy. We need to be in good spirits. And I think that's a great source, you know. Van Halen's attitude. Today's also the day the debut album came out. So it's not totally irrelevant to bring that up. The Van Halen albums, it's what I said about the definition of cool. It's not putting in a lot of effort without looking like it. And for those that know, Eddie is this guitar genius, and he's smiling on stage. He's happy-go-lucky. They're like kids. They're like children on stage in an ice cream shop. You know, I think about that picture where it's Alex Van Halen covered in like McDonald's, like French fries, and they're covered in food. It's almost disgusting. But it's like, hey, that's youth. That's not taking it so serious. And that's, we're talking about classic rock. Everyone wants to call metal this dark, pessimistic genre. Speed metal is fun. It's, you know, it's running around on stage diving. It's the mosh pits. The mosh pits aren't violent. They're violent, but it's not hatred. It's not aggression. It's community, like what Oros said, you know. Um, Bass guitarist says, part of my whole reason for becoming a streamer and dissident musician was to red pill the Zoomers on the 80s metal Van Halen. There it is, man. That's appropriate. And just like what we talk about here on the show, that's another angle that's being neglected. And I think it could do the movement, so to speak, a lot of good. It can open some horizons. We don't have to be narrow. We don't have to, because I notice with my friends, it gets a little repetitive. It's, you know, joking about the same YouTubers that we're checking out, and it's a little boring, dare I say. So I like to open it up to the music and film side of things, and you can find your philosophy and politics in there too. But it doesn't have to be this edgy thing, right? Yes, Running Free says Roth is pure degeneracy. Yeah, he is. But those albums rule. They had money behind them. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of the. Well, I think Bass Guitarist said it in our ranking. He said, "You party on Saturday and then go to church on Sunday." You know, I know that you guys may not buy that, but I mean, you don't have to. When I first started checking out music, I was running away from the stereotype. You know, I didn't want to be the super serious metal music critic, the Rolling Stone contrarian interviewer. You know, I remember my teacher said it's because in high school I was like a germaphobe, and he would be like, but don't you like listen to metal? Like, don't you like not care about? Aren't you supposed to like ask questions later in general? That was kind of the attitude I got, and it's like that's the perception. That's the, you know, what's the other thing? Yeah, the degeneracy angle. I mean, music is music. You don't need to alter your state of mind to listen to it. The music gives you that feeling, right? So yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't like Metallica specifically didn't do cocaine because of Ozzy Osbourne, you know? So there you go. There's the filtering, learning from the past mistakes. It's really not that weird. It's normal. Am I an Opie and Anthony fan? I don't really check them out. I don't know which one. Who's the guy that talks to Gavin McInnes a lot? I've seen some of his stuff. Yo, intellectual embargo's in here? What the? That was a few minutes ago. Dude. Awesome, man. Awesome. Wow, we got a lot of people in here. That's pretty cool. Metal needs more hooks. And machismo again. That's right. Chad metal. We talked about Chad metal. Yo, running free, going to bed. Peace out. I feel bad for Zoomers. I'm Gen X. I don't know, man. I think I feel bad for you. You're Gen X. What's going on, big guy? Yo, Todd, man. Jumped in earlier. Oh, wanted to jump in earlier. Listen to AA stream earlier, yeah? Don't worry, man. That's what the replay button's for. You're not late to anything. You're always early. You're always on time on YouTube. The notification bell. Yeah, true bass guitarist. It's the conservative parents. You know, Family Ties is a great example. We want to be Alex P. Keaton. We want to be Michael J. Fox. He's shilling for Reagan, which, you know. But you understand the sentiment. It's happy-go-lucky, sharp between the ears, Zoomer energy, enjoying the 80s. That's what we want to encapsulate. Running free, you're a girl. What do we say? Excuse me, bass guitarist, could you type in a certain phrase that comes to mind? A girl in chat. What's a motto that we hear from time to time? I don't know. Maybe it's just me thinking of it. If you're still in the chat. No, I'm just kidding. Just joking. Thank you for tuning in. Of course, of course. No, base the other one. What is you know. Never. I think never is part of it, right? Women rock. Oh, well, wait a second. What does that have to do with? There you go. Big brain content's got it. You guys got it. Yo. You know the thing. Yeah, thanks, subject. We got our boys in here. We got our loyal viewers. Well, to relate to the Anthony Cumia example from Women Rock, the fact that you have people building infrastructure, the fact that the internet and Twitter is decentralized, you have people building their own brands like Thomas, like myself. I think that is enough to feel optimistic about. As I've said, you know, you guys been hearing me ramble on. Nah, it's always good, man. These are always cool. I appreciate you guys. Hey, I was so impressed by intellectual embargo being here. I didn't even read what he said, and of course it was insightful. He goes, a mosh pit has a lot of rules and expectations. It's controlled and not chaotic. Clear distinction. Exactly. There are rules. There's no karate in the pit. There's no mean spirit. It's just fun. It's community, of course. Intellectual embargo gets it. Are you a metal guy by chance? He's probably not here anymore. I'm surprised that guy's giving me the time of day. It's surreal to see all you guys. But yeah, I just want to thank all you guys. Before you guys tune out, I want to, Pepe, Lady, Intellectual Embargo, Running Free, Mark, bass guitarist, Todd, man. Did I say Women Rock already? Big brain content. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I really do. Todd, man, to answer your question, I mean, I'm going to be meeting Thomas in March. That's the plan. And I think I'll have an answer for that in concrete terms after that trip. We'll see. I just think it's going to be a lot easier to find jobs from people on the side of politics. Obviously, you shouldn't dox and do anything reckless. I still support anons. I support the anonymity. Everyone should still stay true to that. It's not time to do whatever you want. But things are starting to look good, and I think when people are down, they should remember the fact that there's people behind the scenes, and people don't see what happens behind the scenes. So it's easy to say that there's no progress, but there's a lot of hard work being done. And maybe you guys will actually enjoy the 21st century. You're not just going to be looking forward to the Spenglerian end cycle. You're going to be finding your community, your purpose. So if that's coming up on 2 hours, my goodness. I almost didn't even do this too. Imagine that. So I apologize for any questions I missed. You guys were going back and forth in the chat, delaying all the content I had. No, but this is way better. All right, I think we're wrapping up. If you guys do not have any more questions, we can leave it at that. I don't want to bore you guys. Good times. Good times with my internet friends. Thank you guys again for tuning in. What is the deal with Academic Agent? Well, I'm just making fast friends with some of his mutuals, and I think this is some of the best people right now are waging a war on Twitter and proving that the dissident right is popular. And so that's why I bring up Academic Agent a lot. I see it as a very encouraging thing. And I think other people should too. He does streaming. It's very popular, and it's not boring stuff. So I know it's easy to kind of watch the same stuff over and over again every day, but there are new avenues revealing themselves with things like this Lindsay scandal we talked about earlier. So that's why I keep talking about him. It just seems like he's sort of everyone's gravitating towards him because a lot of interesting things are happening on his sphere, or not his sphere, excuse me, his you know, over on his side of YouTube. Oh man, yeah. Thank you, Todd, man. Yeah, Todd, man, with the thank you for the support. I appreciate it. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, wow. No, it's very cool to hear you say. Thank you. Yeah. I don't encourage other people to do the same. I'm just, I just ran into Thomas and things just escalated. So that's all. Everyone should, be content, check out content. You don't have to, we don't want to be like Lindsay. We don't want to we want ourselves to be celebrities and everybody's an intellectual. We don't need any more personalities. That's why I bring a academic age, and he's got a whole roundtable, so that he can assemble. So it's it's just a cool thing that I think. And you guys came from that, so you can speak on it better than me. But it's interesting to see you guys supporting the show. I mean, I owe a lot of the credit to AA shouting us out, shouting out me and Thomas. So I mean, what else am I supposed to do? I gotta give you guys support back. Can't do it without you. Yeah, yeah, exactly, Tad, man. Just be normal. You can be dissident in your attitude. Let your peers feel it, but find it on their own. Yeah, just and be normal. Be a normal person. Yeah, I agree. Running free. I thought you were going to bed. What's going on, man? What are you still doing here? Big brain content. Very good statement. We need to be personalities in our own community. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't want clout chasers. We don't need more intellectuals. To answer the title of the show again, we are the academic agents, not Lindsay. Lindsay wants to be the academic agent. He wants to be the academic professor. He's not even well read. He doesn't even know where his own ideas originate. He admits it himself. So nice, nice. Yeah, I don't know. What do you say? Should we set up shop or what? What do you guys want? Yo, intellectual dark, or excuse, I was about to say intellectual dark web. Intellectual embargo. I'm sorry. That is a real insult to confuse you with that. I'm glad to see you, man. I can't believe you're in the chat. It's surreal. I remember checking you out along with Keith back then. Last year, I mean. So this is all very, very surprising. Oh, yeah, that is a key distinction. The idea that, when we talk about Aquinas, he mentions how there's some things that science can't find out. You can't, in a materialist worldview, you can't know the metaphysical world all the way through. You can't wrap your head around it. And Lindsay takes that line of thinking and applies it to ideology, which is material. So of course you can narrow it down. That's what history is. That's why we're supposed to have historians, is to make sense of the remnants of these things that spring up from war and conflict in Europe. So of course, yeah, you can't find where liberalism came from. I mean, we can pick a handful of philosophers and not the ones that he chose. Those are very modern examples. And as AA mentioned, he doesn't even get into the nuances of like the Rousseauian radical strain, how that differs from Locke and Descartes. I mean, it's if we just spitballing wanted to fix his books, we could do it very easily. And apparently AA's written a book about liberalism. I didn't know that. So it's just so boring. It's expected. Obviously, we know the score, but yeah, like intellectual embargo said, it's a cop out. Oh, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. Liberalism, who knows? Hey, maybe it's intrinsic, right? Maybe that's part of human nature. He would probably argue. But then when he's talking about punching right, he says, hey, wait a second. We know exactly what it means to be conservative. And he's not talking about Roger Scruton, how to be a conservative. He's talking about authoritarianism. He's talking about monarchy. He's like, wait a second, that he can narrow down the history of, but a history of liberalism that looks bad, according to Lindsay, oh, we better stay away from that. Actually, it's very obscure. You would have to get halfway through the history of philosophy to figure that one out. So what else can you expect? What else can you expect from the latest author, from the latest New York Times selling author? Wow. Oh, Running Free, you're into metal too. Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Aaron McIntyre's into metal. Who else? Bass guitarist, of course. Um, who else? Joel Davis, I think, has hinted at it. What about Keith? What kind of music does Keith listen to? I'm very interested. Can't really get a read on him. I don't know if he's ever posted anything like that. Again, he should get into that stuff. All right. Yeah, I hear you, David the Gnome. That's the thing I have trouble coming to terms with. Yes, how do you explain metals? Oh, excuse me. Metal's fixation on blasphemous material. I don't like that. And a lot of that is in extreme metal. So you can easily get away from it. But even some of the, I mean, with Ozzy, you know, he kind of started that. And so if everything is derivative from that, you're invariably going to find stuff like that. And people want to be edgy and they think it's storytelling. But yeah, that's like you're saying, the band names, symbols. It's very cringe, and it's also boring too. It's like the metal bands that cling on to paganism. Like that stuff's not real. So why is that the cool? And they got killed by the Christians. So I don't know how they think that that's an own. Christianity literally dominated your culture, and you're going to use that for an album cover. I mean, why would you do that? You know what I mean? Yeah, that's why Norway has a lot of cringe. What's my take on stoner metal? Well, I don't like stoners, but stoner metal is kind of interesting. That's kind of, that sound came from a lot of the original early metal bands. And I don't know. I like more like, I like Trouble, and they're Christian too. But they're just, you know, I like stuff that uses the stoner musical style but doesn't overindulge, because I don't really like Sleep. I don't really like that stuff. To me gets very repetitive. So that's my take. I would say be very skeptical of it at the very least. Yeah, David the Gnome, you're right. It just seems like an obvious problem to a right-wing person who likes metal. Yeah. Well, you should be aware of that stuff. That's why you should have a moment of clarity when you look back on the PMRC and Tipper Gore. It's like, oh, that's actually based. Trouble or Great. Yeah, the singer. I don't know exactly how the singer passed away. The people should do their own research on that. But yeah, Eric Wagner is, yeah, that sucks. Yeah, that's something I'm curious to ask Tyler Hamilton about, because I want to separate all of the cringe elements in music and film. But you know, it's like that cliche that you can imagine a boomer saying, "Well, how can you not be a degenerate and listen to Pink Floyd?" And it's like, well, yeah, the band was like that when they made the music. That doesn't mean I have to do the same thing. You know, it's a music and film, it's a commodity like everything else. I don't have to look at that as a role model. It's, you know, it's the food you eat, it's the clothes you wear. It doesn't have to, there doesn't have to be a lot of thought beyond it. I mean, unless it's straying away from virtue, of course. But I think you guys understand. Well, I mean, I don't know, the big brain concept. Yeah, well, I mean, the pagans got, I don't think they didn't win then. They're not winning now. And I don't think Christianity is done for. So I would wait before taking a stance on that. Oh, I don't know. Did he say something cool about? Yeah, They should convert. Exactly, Todd, man. Christ plays the long game. People got to make their choice. You know, not going to be around forever. Gotta make yourself right with God. Eventually. Maybe instrumentals are the way forward, says Fin Fang Foom. Yeah. Maybe that's, yeah, the Shrapnel Records, Yngwie Malmsteen. Shrapnel Records, Vinnie Moore. We gotta play it safe. Hey, that stuff's, there's enough Shrapnel Records instrumental albums to last you a lifetime, so that might not even be the bad move. All right. Am I leaning on, oh, if intellectual embargo's still here, I've got all the time in the world. Yeah, no, I agree with Todd, man. I agree. You should imitate. I know the discipline turns people away, but gotta. It's not me saying it. It's the rule. Okay, yeah. I mean, I know it's part of European history. Yeah, it's just I think you understand from my perspective. It's a lot of them are. It seems like a lot of them are hostile. So they should rein in a lot of that hostility, and then you know, I'm just saying it's. Well, okay, yeah, bass guitars, but again, it's the principle, you know. It's it is difficult. No, yeah, I don't think most would say it's easy. It's just you have to try. You have to the pursuit and the spiritual investment is important. So yeah, you're gonna probably hear some stuff, but man is in a fallen state, so you're just gonna have to do the best you can with what you got, and I think you just got to work through it. I mean, again, we're relatively young people, so there's still time to correct course when we're falling short and being hypocritical. I'm hypocritical, so yeah, there's a lot I got to change. So it at the very least that seed needs to be planted in people's minds, and yeah, imitation of Christ. Yes, we are still going. Yeah, if anyone's got any more questions, I'm all ears. What do you guys want? Anything? Always a pleasure. Has Thomas read that book? I'll ask him for you if you don't mind, Todd, man. He's got me getting back into fiction writing or fiction reading. So something I was something I was born too late for. I don't know. I mean, I know this is like a consumerist answer, but like some some concerts I would have liked to have gone to. Would have been cool to go to record stores, see kind of see the public react to. I know that's very like you're probably expecting like a philosophy answer, but I don't know. I would have liked to have seen the Pat Buchanan 1992 speech live. How about that? Do I like Appetite? Yeah, that's I got a poster of that on my wall. You guys can't see it, but yeah, that's that album kind of changed, one of the precursors to the 90s, honestly. It got away from glam metal and normalized the leather jacket and jeans. Poison changed their look, Motley Crue changed their look. And it's funny because Girls, Girls, Girls came out that same year in 1987. So it was a cultural shift for metal, hard rock. And I think it kind of paved the way for change in music in general. I think that's what made alternative rock possible. Although it was probably going that way anyway because you had glam metal. What's the word? Not overdose. I mean, people were overdosing on glam metal. It was just all over MTV to the point where I think a lot of people. I mean, there is an argument to be had that in the early '90s, you had brand new glam metal bands like Heaven's Edge, Dangerous Toys. There were bands like it looked like it could have lasted another decade if you look at some of the underrated glam from the early '90s. But MTV decided to shift to a new audience, and that's where you get the Seattle scene, alternative. And every decade the music changes. In the '70s, you had disco, and that didn't last very long. Yeah, bass guitarist knows. He knows the lore. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Warren and Skid Row. I mean, you still. I don't think I said that on Oroz's interview. I kind of wanted to, but when he asked where did the '90s kind of originate, well, in the '80s, I think you had a lot of people tired of the kind of pop sensibilities. Glam metal is kind of the most visual example. And I just think a change is inevitable, just like the cultural shifts today. I think to look at one specific area might be missing the larger scale. It's kind of a multifaceted thing that, because you had the '60s crowd growing up by that time, you can imagine after graduating with Van Halen and pop, new wave, they wanted something that was theirs, and so Seattle seemed like the place where everything was happening. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, of course, the 50s Americana, you would like to see that for yourself and not just read about it. Big brain content. Thanks, I'll check it out. I forgot what I said. So, sorry. How many CDs do you own? Most of them are my, I mean, I think I've bought a few CDs, but I've inherited, well, I mean, most of it's my dad's, but so I owe that to him. To play the instrument, I can kind of make my way around the guitar. I kind of want to get back into that, honestly. What Sam Hyde talks about learning a skill, I think that can also apply to hobbies, keep you busy. That might have to be. I think that's another thing that can preoccupy people in a positive way. Maybe that's the play. I don't know if I said I play drums. I don't. So awesome, awesome. Yeah, late night at Double R Diner. I don't know. What should we talk about next stream? Any ideas? We got some stuff planned with Thomas and Paul. Think you guys are gonna like it. We're talking about a topic after that I think you guys will like. So got stuff lined up for you guys, okay? You guys are spoiled. Spoiled audience. Yo, bass guitarist gives lessons. Sounds like an open invitation, man. Yeah, I want to play like bass guitarist. The way when you see someone as good as bass guitarist, it almost discourages you more from trying because you see how talented he is already. And it's like, if I just get started right now, people don't have the motivation. But I mean, I'm very optimistic in general. I think I'm up for the challenge, is what I'm trying to get at. So maybe that's the way. Yeah, the Sam Hyde diss track. Who could forget? We all need to be SoundCloud rappers so we can collab with Sam Hyde next time he does a diss track. When are we going to get the James Lindsay diss track? When are we going to get the call out, Isn't that something kind of exclusive to rap? The it's sort of a reactionary music genre with all the dynamics at play. You got people responding to one another. That's why we need dissident rappers. We need. Yeah, I mostly played in high school. That was probably my peak. And so I fell out of it, but I'm interested to get back into it. It's another one of those things you don't have to put it away for long. It's always available for you. Oh, that's good you bring that up, bass guitarist. Yeah, I've wanted to play piano too. I know Eddie played piano, and I think he thinks that might have had an influence on him being so good at guitar. He probably had muscle memory, thinking in those patterns, scales, could probably translate a lot easier to the guitar, because it does seem kind of similar. What kind of guitar do I got? I got a, well, I mean, I didn't buy it. I got the Fender Telecaster, and then what's the Steve Vai guitar? The Ibanez. So yo, you played the Star Wars theme? Let's go. Very cool. I want to play like themes. I want to play like, to be able to mimic that just seems so cool. You know what else is really cool is surf guitar. That's like the beginning of like thrash, you know? The, what is it, the tremolo picking? Man, that would make my day to be able to figure that out, because that is so, you know, well, what I said earlier about speed metal's happy, speed metal's energetic, it's youthful. That's what I feel when I check out Dick Dale. What else did you have? Pulp Fiction. Tarantino popularized that Dale song. I don't know exactly how to say it. What is it? Miserlou. It's one of those things when you hear it, you know it. That would be a cool thing to mimic. Yeah, man. Looks like we got a lot of musicians in chat. We could start a band. Huh? What? What are the two figures beside you? Oh, these? Yeah, these are. This is just little things you would find in a store. I don't know. It just looks interesting. So piano is actually way different in how it's laid out. There's only one key for each note in each octave, whereas the same note can be played in multiple positions on the guitar, multiple fingerings. Okay. Yeah, I remember there's an interview where Eddie's playing it. It's, I think it's an interview where he looks kind of bad, and so it's another learning experience. It was when he did that ad for the tennis rackets. That's that's obscure trivia, but with Eddie, he was showing off. I think it was Kramer, and he was playing it like a guitar, and so I sort of imagine the transition to piano is easier, but maybe not. Oh, no, no, it's not that deep, man. It's not that. No, I mean, is this? Hey, you guys don't equate this with like Funko Pops, right? You're not gonna drag me for that, are you? It's not the same. I mean, it's similar. Kind of hard to defend. Hey, you guys aren't giving me a hard time, right? Please, hey, go easy, okay? It's not. That's not what you guys are implying, right? Maybe we got to take these down. You know, maybe it's. You got a Ronald Reagan Funko Pop. I didn't even know they had that. Okay, cool, cool. No problem. Dude, bass guitarist, I bet I could cite like most Van Halen interviews, and you know what I'm talking about. Hey, you know what's a really cool interview? Let me pull this up right now. Sorry, Avril Lavigne. I'm gonna have to close that. It was for A Different Kind of Truth, which also passed its anniversary recently. If you got the DVD, or it might just be a bonus thing with the. It might have just come along with the CD. I'm going to try and find this. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Hey, bass guitar. Yeah, no problem, Otto. I know you were asking in good faith. Just joking, of course. Hey, bass guitarist. Is this a cool interview or what? This is the good old days. This is a real reunion. This is authentic Van Halen. You know as well as anybody the history that these guys shared. I mean, these guys have been back and forth, and this interview just really symbolizes the return to being good sports, not at odds anymore. This is what real friends can do. People, the grudges aren't worth it, not in the long term. It feels important in the short term, but you gotta, this should be a visual aid for anybody who's holding anything against their friends. This is how you know it's possible. You can amend probably most things. Yeah, this was like them talking about them in Pasadena, the early days of the band, and Roth, with his personality, directing everything, and then the brothers pitch in. It's just good times, man. And they're remembering. It's like you it's very boomer, but in a good way. That's the kind of stuff that would make you sympathetic for. They're remembering the good old days. Very cool. Do I like Rush? Yes. Rush is awesome. Rush liked this broad a little too much. They got that one song that's the same title as one of her books. And I think they're like Lolberts. Neil Peart or Peart. I remember Eddie Trunk made a big deal about how it's pronounced, but I remember he disavowed, apparently, what I read, Ayn Rand, and said, "Oh, I was into that when I was young, but I'm a different person now." So that's pretty cool. But yeah, as far as progressive rock, I mean, that is amazing. And some of it sounds like metal. Bastille Day. Caressive Steel has the first two albums. The first album is like a Led Zeppelin ripoff, but it's kind of interesting. And then the second album, that's where you start to see the progression. And then, of course, once they get into the concept albums, Limelight's better than Tom Sawyer. I might agree. Limelight. That was one of the songs that hooked me. Tom Sawyer, I think, was the first I heard. And even though it's keyboards, that's not the end of the world for me. Keyboards can be appropriate. Speaking of Van Halen, that was a big contention with that band, was the keyboards. Oh, you were talking about Different Kind of Truth. Yeah, that album, I think, it's the epitome of half I like, half I'm iffy. That's my take, because I think I like exactly half of the songs. And it's so funny, people complain about that song Out of Space was from one of their demos early on, and people don't like, hey, when a band didn't actually write new music, they just released a song that no one had heard. Well, if I've never heard it, then the same as it being brand new. No, I mean, people say that that's lazy, but I mean, what? It's music. It's new content. You know, like. So that was one of the things I remember people saying about Different Kind of Truth when I would go back and look at people's reactions, I think. And then Tattoo's a controversial song because it doesn't sound like anything else on that album. As you said, She's the Woman. That's the classic Van Halen style. Dude, Chinatown with the two-handed opening intro. That is a metal song. That's a metal Van Halen song. Yeah, dude, yeah. Eddie with his gear on that album, it really stands out. Yeah, Otto. Yeah, the synth part, they like Tom Sawyer. They also like the drum part. You know, that's another moment. So yeah, no bass guitars. If I can imagine that being an album on my first listen, being like, dude, these guys are back, and I think that was my impression when I first heard it. And then it was one of those things where, like, the more I on repeat, I think I start to see the weaknesses. But no knock on, like, overall, I wouldn't knock most of that album. No, Otto, I don't. It's a very boring genre, to be honest. It gets old really quick. Aw, dude. Bass guitarist. I should have put one of those two new songs. I wonder if people even know about those songs. That's on the compilation album. There's and it's weirdly called Volume 1, and Volume 2 never came out. But dude, those two songs, that, for those of you that don't know, I actually prefer Can't Get This Stuff No More. In my opinion, people should look up that song. Can't Get This Stuff No More. That, dude, talk about like lifting your spirits up. I mean, could you imagine, especially in the context of the 90s? Oh, Big Brain Content. Hey, man, thanks for stopping by, man. Thanks for stopping by at the Double R Diner. Always a pleasure to see you in the chat, man. Always insightful. Thank you, man. So, in the 90s, I think that's when that compilation came out. Because is that before Hagar came back? In the early 2000s? Anyways, I think the timeline's right. Roth comes back, and he does those two songs. And from what I've heard, Eddie said in an interview that Roth wouldn't be able to do that stuff live because, for those that know, Roth in this phase of his career, he was doing the Vegas shows. His solo career was winding down. If you've ever heard Diamond Dave, which I might even have that CD. There's this CD which is infamous. Well, I guess just to me. Most people don't even know it, but I mean, look at that. Can you get more boomer? Can you get more bruh? So the guy's like losing his hair, but he's still surrounding himself with like supermodels, which looks like too orchestrated. It looks astroturfed, but it's kind of part of the character. It's very hard to describe to the average person. But anyways, he comes back to Van Halen and he writes these two songs, which is proof that they can still do it. They can still write classic stuff. And then they broke up again. So You know, I think if people are honest, Van Halen is one of the best bands in the world and definitely one of the most dysfunctional ever, because the beefs and history is cartoonish. I mean, it is worse than Spinal Tap, how cartoonish the band's history is. So I think bass guitarist can would agree with that. It is just a roller coaster, to say the least. Yeah, people should be picky with music. It's kind of the hierarchy. We talked about that in the Oros interview. Hierarchy in music. There's a hierarchy in terms of the industry. You got like, managers and stuff like that. There's the hierarchy in that regard. But I mean, there's in music, the creative imagination, the lack of structure can be waning for. I mean, I made the argument that alternative rock prevented us from expanding on metal and rock. It just kind of stayed there, and it's kind of, you can hear it in modern rock production. It's just a throwback to the 90s. And I do think metal has already peaked, so there's really not so much you can do, besides mimicking other stuff, that saying. But I mean, it would be nice to kind of get out of the alternative, because when you turn on rock radio and they play a new band, it's trying to sound like it's trying to ride the wave of the 90s, because that's kind of like Oros was saying that like Americana kind of ends in the early 2000s with a few films, and that's kind of interesting to try and find that endpoint. But yeah, I know that that's like a boomer talking point, how music has been commodified, and the studio runs a lot of the music over authentic talent. Okay. But we never really graduated from the 90s in terms of music. And so I guess we're going to have to wait for nostalgic trends to get us out of that. Yo, bass guitarist with the gear trivia. Let's go. Yeah, dude, I can't imagine like Eddie assembling the Frankenstein. I mean, him just messing around with the amp. I mean, stuff like that is fascinating. I don't even really understand it, but it's really something. The guy was, I mean, that is a genius mindset to assemble that, and to think to, you know what I mean? It's just, no, this is, all right. I think I'm gonna head out, but thank you guys, man. Can't thank you guys enough. You guys make the show possible and make it worthwhile. So thank you again for everybody tuning in. I'm gonna check out of the Double R Diner here, and we'll have some more content with Thomas and Paul. We're gonna have stuff lined up. Don't you worry. We're setting up stuff for you guys. So thank you again. Appreciate it as always. Have a great rest of your evening.